The terminal buzzed with quiet chatter and rolling suitcases as Usha Vance adjusted the crimson-red hat on her head, a simple accessory that carried the weight of a political world. She didn't wear it for attention, she wore it for conviction. But conviction, in today's America, could get you exiled. She was barely 2 steps onto the plane when the stairs started. One woman in the aisle seat straightened, subtly sticking out a leg to block Usha's path. Her voice was low but sharp enough to cut. "We don't want your kind here." Usha paused, composed. Her fingers brushed the brim of her MAGA hat. "My kind?" "Exactly. I don't feel safe around people who think like you." Phones clicked on. A man, 3 rows back, raised his voice. "Let's not turn this into a political flight." Another chimed in. "People like her are why this country is so divided." It wasn't what they said, it was how they said it. Like she wasn't a person, like she was a virus. Flight attendant Diane Matthews approached, a syrupy smile painted across her face. "Is there a problem here, ma'am?" she asked, but her eyes never left Usha's hat. "Just some passengers voicing concerns," the woman in the aisle seat replied sweetly. "Multiple concerns," Diane added, louder this time so the surrounding passengers could hear. "Passengers are feeling unsafe." Usha remained composed. "Unsafe because I have different beliefs?" Diane's voice dropped half an octave. "We pride ourselves on being an inclusive airline." A young man a few seats up spoke out. "Inclusive, except for anyone who isn't progressive." The reaction was swift. Someone behind him muttered, "QAnon nut," and he shrank into his seat. Usha found her seat by the window. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the rising tension. Diane leaned over to the intercom. "Security to gate 27. We have a situation." The words fell like a guillotine blade. Passengers began whispering. Phones turned, silently recording. Then, 2 men in blue airline security uniforms boarded the plane, Thompson and Martinez, one with a clipboard, the other with a tablet. "Ma'am," Thompson began, "we've received reports of disruptive behavior." I boarded quietly and took my seat. "While antagonizing other passengers," Diane cut in. "With my hat?" Usha asked. "Is that the disruption now?" Before the officers could respond, a voice rang from the front of the plane. "Excuse me, how is she the threat?" Every head turned. A tall man in a military cap stood, righteous anger burning in his eyes. "She's done nothing. You're all just afraid of a hat." Thompson motioned toward him. "Sir, we'll need you to deplane." "You're serious?" "Now." The man hesitated, looked at Usha. Regret painted across his face as he collected his things and left. Diane smirked. "Anyone else want to speak up?" Silence. Martinez tapped his screen. "We've received 6 passenger complaints through the app." "About my hat?" Usha repeated. "About making them feel unsafe." Usha scanned the plane. Every face was either hostile or indifferent. Phones hovered like drones. "Ma'am," Diane said coldly, "remove the hat or remove yourself." The air was leaden. Usha reached up, fingers brushing the brim, but she didn't flinch. "You know what my husband always says?" she said quietly. "Bullies only win when good people stay quiet." Diane rolled her eyes. "Maybe he can save you." "What's he going to do? Call Trump?" Usha didn't answer. She simply reached for her phone and sent 3 quick texts. "Gate 27 MAGA hat, removed." Diane snatched the phone. "No recordings allowed during removal." "That wasn't a recording," Usha said. "It was a warning." Diane froze. Outside the window, something changed. A flurry of motion on the tarmac. Black SUVs pulling in. Security detail. The captain emerged from the cockpit, curious, confused. "What's happening?" Diane's radio crackled. "Gate 27. Motorcade incoming." Vice President confirmed. The blood drained from her face. She turned slowly toward Usha, her smile evaporating. "You're not just someone in a red hat?" Usha said nothing. She didn't need to. Because at that moment, JD Vance was already in the terminal and walking fast. The plane was silent now. Every passenger held their breath, as if afraid to make the wrong move. Diane Matthews stood frozen by the aisle, eyes flicking nervously toward the door as the motorcade outside became more evident. The airliner's engine hummed in a low, steady tone, but all around the tension was palpable. Usha didn't flinch. She simply stared straight ahead, her fingers tracing the worn edges of her red hat. The hat that had become a symbol, not of division, but of resistance. It had caused enough of a stir in the political world, enough to make her a lightning rod. Now, it was doing the same on this plane. The flight attendants had retreated to the back of the plane. Their whispers could be heard, though no one spoke directly to Usha. Their conversation wasn't meant for her ears, but in this confined space, it was inevitable. "I don't care if she's rich or who she knows, she can't just get special treatment," one of them hissed. "Are we really going to just let her make a scene?" The other whispered back. "She's not just some random person, though. This is bad." Outside the window, the motorcade screeched to a halt. The SUV doors flung open, and Secret Service agents spilled out, sharp suits, earpieces, and serious expressions that marked their urgency. A figure emerged from the back, the one everyone had been waiting for, JD Vance. He strode across the tarmac with a calm, purposeful gait, his sharp jaw set in a firm line. His eyes scanned the situation around him, and Usha could see the fire in them even from her seat. He was used to this, used to the media, used to the conflict, but never used to being silenced. He wasn't going to let this be another moment of silence. The flight attendants scrambled now, confusion washing over their faces. They knew who JD Vance was, but they didn't expect him to show up at this moment. They had thought, mistakenly, that the higher-ups had just given instructions to remove a woman with a controversial hat. They didn't realize the storm they were about to face. The captain, an older man with graying hair, approached the cockpit door, his brow furrowed as he caught sight of the scene unfolding on the tarmac. "Is this some kind of joke?" he muttered, speaking to no one in particular, before stepping forward and speaking directly to Diane. "What's going on here, Matthews?" Diane's face was pale now, the weight of the situation closing in on her. "The vice president's... Well, we're supposed to do something about the woman in seat 15A?" The captain blinked, clearly taken aback. "What?" Before Diane could explain further, the plane's door opened. The quiet murmur of whispers became an uproar as JD Vance appeared in the doorway, flanked by two Secret Service agents. The plane froze. The power of his presence flooded the cabin in waves. "Usha Vance," JD said, his voice steady, commanding. "I see there's been some misunderstanding here." The tension broke, but only to be replaced with a new kind of uncertainty. No one had expected this. Certainly not Diane, whose jaw now hung slack. No one had expected JD Vance to just walk onto the plane, to step into the middle of what was clearly an escalating political firestorm. Usha's eyes met his, and in that moment, the world outside the plane didn't matter. The whispers, the judgment, the fear, it all felt far away. In his gaze, she saw understanding. "I'm not sure what's going on," JD continued, "but I'll tell you this. No one here is being forced to be afraid of their beliefs. If that's what's going on, we've got a much bigger problem." The captain opened his mouth, but the words didn't come. "Get the security detail out of here," JD said coolly, turning back to the agents who had been watching. "You're all leaving. Now." The two agents hesitated, their training keeping them on alert, but the look in JD's eyes left no room for negotiation. The silent battle of wills that passed between them ended in a nod. They stepped aside. "But sir," Diane protested, "this is a security situation. We have passengers who feel unsafe. JD's eyes flicked to her, and Usha could see the way his patience thinned. Your security issue is about a hat, Diane. A hat. And that's not something that deserves a plane delay or anyone's worry. The real problem is people who can't handle different opinions. If you want to talk about safety, start with that. There was no more argument. Diane swallowed hard, her gaze darting to the other passengers, but none of them said anything. The room felt as though it had collectively held its breath. Then Usha stood. "I think it's time we all remember what freedom of speech is really about," she said, voice calm, unwavering. "It's not about stifling the ones we disagree with. It's about letting everyone speak." Her hand moved to the red hat, and for a brief, eternal moment, everyone seemed to hold their breath. "I'll be keeping it on." The silence stretched as JD Vance turned to leave, his presence like a protective barrier around her. His steps were measured but purposeful as he moved toward the door. He paused at the threshold, then turned back to address the entire plane. "And if anyone else has a problem with that," he said, "you can take it up with me." With that, JD Vance exited the plane, and for a long moment, no one moved. The engines hummed again, but it wasn't just the noise of the airplane. It was the quiet aftermath of an unseen hand making sure that, even in the darkest moments, justice found its way. The engines roared back to life, and the aircraft began to taxi toward the runway. For a few brief moments, the hum of the turbines was the only sound that filled the cabin. The passengers sat frozen in place, some still processing the scene they had just witnessed, others contemplating what it meant to be part of something much larger than they had anticipated. Usha remained seated, her red hat still perched atop her head, a symbol of defiance, a symbol of freedom. But inside, her thoughts churned, her mind racing to comprehend the full impact of the moments that had just unfolded. She had been removed from one storm, only to find herself thrust into the eye of another. JD Vance had come to her rescue, but for what? Was it truly for her, or was it for the message that her actions had sent? She had become an unwilling lightning rod in this political game, and JD's actions had transformed that symbol into something much bigger than either of them could have predicted. The plane moved steadily forward, cutting through the sky. As the altitude climbed and the city below began to disappear into the distance, Usha's gaze drifted to the small window beside her. The land, so vast and endless, seemed to echo her isolation in the midst of this whirlwind. The thought lingered in her mind. What had she gotten herself into? It wasn't long before the first whispers began again. The same flight attendants, the same passengers who had avoided her gaze only moments earlier, now found their courage to speak. The murmurs were quieter this time, more cautious, more reverent even, as if the storm outside could only be understood by those who had witnessed it firsthand. Diane Matthews sat across the aisle, her arms folded tightly across her chest. Her expression was unreadable, though her eyes remained focused on Usha, a mixture of admiration and apprehension flashing beneath her stern exterior. She had seen JD Vance take control, but she had also seen something else, something she wasn't sure she was ready to understand. The divide had deepened, the line between right and wrong blurred into shades of gray. "I don't know what you're trying to do, Usha," Diane said quietly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. "But you've made things worse. Now they're going to watch you even closer." Usha turned her head slowly, meeting Diane's gaze for the first time since the confrontation. "They've always been watching," Usha replied, her voice steady, though the weight of her words pressed heavily in the cabin. "I just decided to make them see something they didn't want to." Diane's lips parted, but no words came. The silence lingered between them, a moment of recognition that neither one could escape. Usha had become a symbol, not by choice, but by the simple act of standing her ground. The flight continued, the minutes stretching into hours as the plane flew ever higher, the horizon unfolding beneath them. The passengers, while still tense, began to shift. The buzz of conversation started to grow, but it was no longer focused on Usha alone. It was about the deeper undercurrent of the situation, the issues of freedom, of power, of control. The storm that was brewing within the confined space of this aircraft was no longer just about one person or one hat. It was about the societal fault lines that had been exposed. Usha leaned back in her seat, her mind spinning with the weight of it all. The silence felt like a heavy cloud, one that pressed against her chest as the flight took her further into unknown territory. Her eyes flicked briefly toward the cockpit, where the captain stood, his posture stiff and formal as he observed the situation unfolding behind him. He hadn't said a word since JD Vance had left, but Usha knew what was happening. The flight crew, the attendants, they were all watching. They were all waiting for someone to take control again. And as much as she wanted to be left alone in her thoughts, she knew that she couldn't simply ignore the fact that the eyes of the world were now on her. She was no longer just a passenger on a flight. She was a part of something larger, something that had already begun to unfold far beyond the confines of this plane. As the flight neared its destination, Usha could feel the unease in the air. The tension had only grown since JD's departure, the weight of it pressing on every single passenger as they prepared to land. The moment they touched down, Usha knew it would be the beginning of something else. The world would see her again, but this time, they wouldn't see her as a woman in a red hat on an airplane. They would see the full force of her message, the message that had been carried not just by her, but by everyone who had witnessed the events unfold. The aircraft's wheels screeched against the runway, and the plane came to a smooth stop. The cabin remained eerily quiet as the seatbelt sign clicked off. But even as the doors were opened, the storm still raged inside Usha. She had made a stand, but she wasn't sure what had changed. Would the world embrace her, or would they try to tear her down? Only time would tell. The jetway extended, its metal frame groaning slightly under the weight of the storm that had followed Usha Vance off the plane. As the passengers filed off one by one, their faces were clouded with questions, thoughts, and doubts they didn't fully understand. But there was one thing that was certain. The ripple effect had already begun. Usha stepped into the terminal, her red hat still firmly placed atop her head, a beacon in the chaos. The moment her feet touched the ground, a flood of flashbulbs exploded around her, blinding light flashing from every direction. Journalists scrambled for a clearer shot, their questions coming fast and furious. "Miss Vance, what's your message to the people watching this live? How do you feel about being removed from the flight? Do you think JD Vance's actions were justified?" Usha didn't flinch. Her face remained steady, her eyes locked ahead. She was no longer just the woman who had been ejected from a flight. She was a symbol now, whether she had wanted it or not. A suited security official approached, his expression unreadable. Without a word, he gestured for her to follow him. Usha knew better than to protest. This wasn't about personal choice anymore. She had already crossed that line. What followed was inevitable. Behind the glass doors, the press had been corralled into a small area, the noise fading into the background as Usha was led into a back room. The official spoke in clipped tones. "You'll need to stay here for a while. We'll have someone from your team here soon." Usha didn't respond immediately. Her mind was still racing, trying to piece together the magnitude of what had happened. The flight, the confrontation, JD's unexpected intervention. It was all blurring together into a single, overwhelming force. Hours passed before a familiar face appeared in the doorway. "Usha, we need to talk." It was Diane Matthews again, but this time her demeanor was different. She was no longer just an observer. Now she was part of the narrative. Her connection to Usha had deepened in ways neither of them could have anticipated, and she knew it. The events on the plane had pulled them both into something much bigger than either had signed up for. Diane moved toward the small table where Usha sat. There was no pretense in her posture, no attempt to disguise the weight of the conversation they were about to have. "I didn't think I'd be standing here with you, but here we are," Diane said, her voice heavy with realization. "What you did. It's not just about you anymore. It's about everything that's happening in this country, and you've set the fuse. You might not have meant to, but you've done it." Usha's eyes locked with Diane's, and for a moment she saw the cracks in Diane's cold exterior. There was something there now, something that was beyond just the surface-level interactions they had shared earlier. A connection had formed between them in the face of chaos, and it wasn't going away. "You think I don't know that?" Usha finally replied, her voice steady but tinged with exhaustion. "But I'm not the one who started this fire. All I did was throw a match in the wind. The storm was already coming." Diane sighed, sitting down across from her. The weight of their conversation wasn't lost on either of them. They were in this together now. There was no going back. "That's the thing," Diane said, leaning forward slightly. "You're right. The storm was coming, but you just made it bigger. You've forced people to take sides. There's no gray area anymore. The lines are clear." Usha's mind spun. She had anticipated the fallout, but not like this. The situation had escalated beyond her control into something that was now being scrutinized by the world. And then, from the door, another figure appeared, JD Vance. He walked in with the calm assurance that Usha had come to expect, though now there was something else in his eyes. He wasn't just the man who had defended her in that moment on the plane. He was someone who had positioned himself as the voice of reason in a nation torn apart by division. "Usha, we've got a problem," JD said, his tone direct. "The media's already got their narrative, and it's not in your favor. You're being painted as a martyr for a cause no one fully understands. But there's an opportunity here, if you play it right." Usha looked at JD, then at Diane, her thoughts racing. Was there still time to take control of the narrative, or had the storm already washed away her chance to do so? "What's the plan, then?" Usha asked, her voice calm but laced with a hint of desperation. JD hesitated for a moment, then leaned in closer. "You've got to embrace it. The people need a face for their frustrations. They need someone who stands for them. You've become that symbol, whether you wanted it or not. The only way out is through. Take control of this narrative. Tell them your side. Tell them why you did what you did." The room fell silent for a moment. Usha could feel the weight of their words pressing on her, but she knew it was true. She couldn't go back now. She had to push forward. Her eyes flicked between Diane and JD, two people who had become entwined in this strange moment of history with her. The storm was far from over, but it was clear now. She was the one who would have to steer its course. "All right," Usha said finally, her voice steady with resolve. "Let's give them something they won't forget." As Usha walked into the waiting press conference, her red hat a defiant mark of identity, the storm outside seemed to pale in comparison to the one she was about to ignite. The cameras flashed, the reporters surged forward. The world was waiting, and Usha was ready to give them an answer.